Good evening and welcome to this episode of the Mary Trump Show. It is that time again. It's been a while. So, we are doing an Ask Mary Anything within reason. So, there's a lot going on. And this way, I get to focus on what is top of mind for you guys because it's really difficult sometimes to figure out what to focus on. We've got rising fascism, we've got the erosion of voting rights, especially for Black and Brown people in America. We have the demotion of women to second class citizens. And the fact that despite all of that, despite the fact that all of that is purely driven by the Republican Party, the fascist, anti-democratic, pro-authoritarian Republican Party, we still don't know if the Democrats are going to win in November, which is deeply, deeply troubling. So I want to know what's going on with you, what you're thinking about. So I've got some questions already, and hopefully more will come in as the show progresses. Here we go. From Carrie in Baltimore, Maryland. If you could pick 3 issues for the Democrats to focus on going into the final stretch of midterms, what would they be? Abortion rights, and abortion rights. I'm actually not kidding about that, because what the Republicans are focusing on is the economy and so-called law and order, which is kind of hysterical coming from the most lawless party, certainly in modern American history. These are also law and order is also an issue about which they've done nothing, and that is something that people in Congress don't really have much control over. I think generally speaking, it's an issue that's got to be dealt with at the local level. And to do anything more broadly would require a majority consensus in the Senate, which, as long as the Republicans have more than 40 seats, isn't going to happen. So Democrats need to focus on the one issue that crosses party lines, that has an impact on the vast majority of Americans. And by that, I don't mean just women, but men who give a shit about the women they're married to or related to or friends with. And it's something that transcends things like law and order and the economy. First of all, the economy is, or the aspects of the economy they're focusing on, inflation and gas prices, have absolutely nothing to do with President Biden. I mean, he can do the best he can, but he doesn't have any impact on those things, really. So let's focus on the one thing that can bring most of us together and that most of us agree on: a woman's right to choose. We can only get a federal protection of abortion rights if the Democrats don't just keep control of the Senate, but get meaningful control of the Senate. So I would prefer that we run the table, but we need at least 52 Democratic senators in place. From Jason in Seattle, Washington. With candidates like Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz, why is the religious right still voting in such big numbers? Don't Democrats have the stronger moral case? Well, it kind of depends on what you think moral means, right? Does moral mean providing everybody with universal health care? Does it mean giving parents tax benefits and universal child care? Is it moral to make sure that women have as many rights as men do in this country? Is it moral to do everything in our power to make sure our children don't get slaughtered in schools by weapons of war that shouldn't be available to anybody? Or is moral protecting the rights of a clump of microscopic cells? So The so-called religious right or white evangelicals think that the most important thing is protecting the microscopic cells. And when that's your position, right? When you think that's what morality is, then you don't care about if somebody's killed puppies as long as they're going to vote to deny women the right to reproductive health. They don't care if the guy running for Senate in Georgia paid for 10 abortions or 20 or 100 or 1,000 because, yes, in your view, abortion is murder, so he committed 10 or 20 murders, but theoretically, but he will prevent, by voting with the Republicans to outlaw abortion for all women in this country, he will prevent millions of murders. See how that works? So they'll swallow anything. They'll say, God chooses imperfect vessels or whatever bullshit excuses they come up with. Don't look for logical consistency from these people. And you know what? Let's not play their game. I don't really care what they think. I don't care what they think is moral. They, as far as I'm concerned, have no right in the conversation. And we just need to do what's right for the American citizens who believe that they do and should have a right to bodily autonomy. Let's see. From Nicole in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're the party of the common people. I assume that's Democrats. Are our candidates telling enough personal stories of the people our policies help? It worked for Bill Clinton, but seems like it's becoming a lost art. Yeah, Nicole, I agree with you. It is a lost art, and it's a vitally important one. And I'm not sure why the Democrats don't focus more on it. The Republicans really don't either. But it turns out that fear and hatred are more persuasive than love and kindness, which is a very sad commentary on human nature. But unfortunately, it happens to be true. That part of us hasn't evolved as quickly as other parts have, which is a terrible thing. But yes, if we can find people who are impacted by the Supreme Court's decision to take away a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to bodily autonomy, a woman's right to health care, a woman's right to privacy, that will go a long way. Just as the same thing, if we can find somebody who was just impacted by Hurricane Ian and told not to evacuate in time and hear those stories, although unfortunately, a lot of those people did not survive the hurricane. It might help the rest of us gain some insight into what people who are directly impacted by Republicans' horrible policies or basically malpractice, how those things were affecting other people that may not be directly affecting us. So it's a great idea, and somebody needs to get on it. Let's see, from David in Brooklyn. If Elon Musk completes his Twitter deal, is it worth defending the platform and fighting the right there? Oh, fighting the right there. Should the way we engage with each other there change? Okay, if Elon Musk is allowed to complete his Twitter deal, I mean, that's just more evidence that the world is totally fucked and that only the worst people, generally speaking, can become billionaires. And we need to rethink that. I mean, there was just a stat that came out that 50% of the poorest 50% of Americans own 2% of the country's wealth. If that doesn't send a chill down our spines, I'm not sure what will. It's a horrifying statistic. Anyway, we Democrats have to stop running away from the fight. Yeah, Elon Musk is a despicable person. I didn't know this. He has 108 million Twitter followers, which is just terrifying. He has more influence than Fox News, and that's like really just terrifying. So when it was announced months ago that he was going to buy Twitter, people fled. Like thousands of people were leaving. Tens and tens of thousands of people were leaving Twitter. We can't keep doing that. It just, why? We're going to leave every field open to them? No. I don't know how that's going to change the culture of Twitter. I have no idea. But it is still a valuable place for us to be fighting. So, hang in there. And it may not happen anyway. He's lost a bunch of his funding already. And these things never happen overnight. So there will probably be another twist in this story. From Barbara. Have you ever considered making a citizen's arrest of Donald at any of the family gatherings? No. No. But I mean, I'm not invited to any of the family gatherings. So if I were, who knows? Who knows what could happen? Maybe that's why they don't invite me. From Tina in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our so-called radical base fights for minority rights and police reform. Republicans have the Oath Keepers and insurrectionists. How do we get the media to stop making both sides style comparisons? Yeah, Tina, I'm with you. This drives me absolutely crazy to talk about the Republican base and the Democratic base in those broad terms suggests equivalence. And nothing could be further from the truth. As you point out, the right is the Oath Keeper, the right, the base of the Republicans are the Oath Keepers, the insurrectionists, the Proud Boys, the 3%ers. These are white supremacists, anti-Semites, neo-Nazis, misogynists, homophobes, anti-immigrant haters, on and on and on. They are absolutely the worst of us. The Democratic base is largely women of color, urban dwellers, college-educated people, et cetera, and what we want is, as you say, minority rights, voting rights for everybody, police reform, healthcare for everybody, childcare for everybody, and that's the difference. I mean, they hate us and want to take away all of our rights. We may or may not hate them. Certainly, we hate what they stand for. I kind of hate their hate, but I still want them all to have healthcare. That's the difference. How do we get the media to do anything? I don't friggin' know. I wish I did. I wish I knew the answer to that. And it's something that we need to figure out. If we can make the show big enough and we could have enough people watching it, that would be a good start. From Rosa in Portland, Oregon. I know I mispronounced that, but I'm from New York, so that's how I say it. President Biden got the most votes in history. Should he be hitting the campaign trail in as many states as he can, or is it better if he's above the fray? I think right now, I haven't checked recently, but President Biden does not have the best approval rating. And what we found based on the polls, we had a point at which Republicans were leading because that's sort of what happens in off years, even though this is not a normal off year. And then Democrats closed the gap, but now the Democrats have a slight advantage, and hopefully that trend is going to continue. So basically what that tells us is that despite President Biden's low approval rating, the Democrats were still doing well. So it's not, I don't know that his campaigning would necessarily help. I'm sure there are places in which it would, and I'm sure they know that about that better than I do. But another great mystery to me is why his approval rating is so low. But again, that's because the media frames things so badly. This is not a normal election year. Nothing's been normal about the last 6 years, and they need to stop pretending that President Biden's administration is a normal administration that followed another normal administration, because that's just insanity. From Rick in San Francisco, California. The closer the legal hammer comes to Donald, do you see any of his children or people in his orbit flipping? We know he'd throw them under the bus in a second. Yeah, Rick, absolutely. Donald would throw everybody under the bus in a second, even though, of course, that he's not going to have the opportunity to, because in this instance, he's the big fish. So it won't do his cause any good to flip on other people, right? So the question then becomes, are the people in his orbit smart enough or cold-blooded enough or strategic enough, or do they have enough sense of self-preservation to flip on him, right? Because a lot of these people might be in a lot of trouble. They may have lots and lots of legal exposure. I would think especially his children. I think Ivanka would flip on him in a second. Eric, maybe, probably. Donnie, no. I think that there's something going on there we don't know about. I think it's highly unlikely that Donnie would have the guts to do that. It also depends on how people make the calculation about their future. Like, some people's entire identity and wealth are tied to Donald, like Donnie, for example. That's not the case with Ivanka. That's not the case with people like Mark Meadows. So suffice it to say, the next 6 to 12 months are going to be fascinating. From Victor in Detroit, Michigan. If we somehow hold Congress and the Senate, is that the time to move aggressively on ending the filibuster, expanding the court, and getting rid of the Electoral College? If not now, when? If not now, when indeed? Yes, Victor, that is the time. If we prevail in November and have enough votes to overturn the filibuster, that needs to happen like literally on the first second the new Congress opens in 2023. There's nothing more important to saving our democracy than getting rid of the filibuster and turning the Senate into a Democratic body, which it's not now. I mean, if you need 60 votes to determine whether or not you can vote on something, that is not a democracy. So this shouldn't even be a question. Anybody who cares about democracy should understand that getting rid of the filibuster is not just as essential, it's imperative. It's absolutely urgent. And senators who don't understand that don't deserve to have their job. The filibuster is not in the Constitution. It's an extra constitutional tactic that was added, I don't know when exactly, sometime in the 19th century. And it was essentially added to protect the power of white supremacists. And it has been used very frequently, at least, before the era of Mitch McConnell, who just uses it all the time. But in the past, it was used sparingly, but almost exclusively to handicap things like voting rights and civil rights. So get rid of the Electoral College, expand the Supreme Court to 15, double the size of the federal judiciary. Getting rid of the Electoral College, that's a much tougher ask, unfortunately, because that would require, I believe it would require a constitutional amendment. I hope I'm wrong about that, because if that is what's required, it's almost certainly never going to happen, because the Democrats would need, I don't know, I think you need like a supermajority of the Senate, supermajority of the states to sign on. Yeah. So we need to figure out other ways to get around that. From Neha in Boston, Massachusetts. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Why does the media always imply economics are a Republican issue? Obama is the one who saved us from Bush's financial crisis. I know. I'm telling you, the Republicans are really good at casting the party as the party of the strong economy, as the party of national security, as the party of fucking family values. as the party of law and order, right? On and on and on. None of that stuff is true. None of that stuff is true. If you look at there are very simple graphs out there that illustrate clearly just how untrue that is. Republicans almost always tank the economy and lose jobs. Democrats always spend like the first 2 years of their first administration saving the country, stopping the bleeding, and then building it back up, only for Republicans to tear it back down again. I do not understand why this is not clear to people. I don't understand why the media fails to help us understand that things like universal health care would be good for the economy. Things like giving everybody a living wage would be good for the economy. Reallocating money from the defense department to other programs that actually make people's day-to-day lives better would help the economy. I don't get it. And it's just another instance in which the media seems trapped in this old pattern that's been established by the Republican Party. And it is infuriating, but again, we just need more people watching the show. We'll be just fine. Okay. I've got 3 questions that are all kind of related. From Evan, I've never gotten too deep into politics outside of voting, but everything is riding on this election. What's the most effective way for me to make a difference in time for the midterms? From Rebecca, we might be able to win over independents, but are any Fox News watchers and Donald supporters still reachable, or at least willing to stay home? From Lily, coming from the Midwest, we still have a few Donald supporters in our family. So far, we stick to dinners, not politics. Is it worth trying to convince them, or at least drop some hints about what they should understand about the right? Okay, so all of those questions are related. Because what would be a complete waste of your time would be to try to convince anybody who voted for Donald twice and still supports him that they need to change their minds about that. They're not going to. So instead of banging your head against that wall, because that's painful, and it's just if you still have good relationships with these people, which I find kind of hard to believe, but that's also because I'm in New York, so I don't have to. Then protect the relationship. I think injecting politics at this point will just be damaging to the relationship, and I don't think it's worth it, because again, you're not going to change anybody's mind. As far as so that's the reachable issue. As far as what we can do to make people stay home, we can't do anything. But what the Republicans are doing a really good job of that, by having just the worst possible candidates that they could possibly have. We've got Herschel Walker in Georgia, who wants a total ban on abortion, no exceptions, and has been credibly accused. And I think it's a fact. He paid for an abortion. He's had God knows how many children out of wedlock. Again, not that I care, but he hasn't acknowledged these children. His own son, the one child that he's acknowledged, has come out vehemently against him. Mehmet Oz is running for Senate in Pennsylvania, but he lives in New Jersey. He has a dual citizenship with Turkey. He's known to have close ties with Erdogan, who is an autocrat, a very dangerous autocrat in Turkey. And just came out that he's killed a bunch of puppies. And then, of course, there's J.D. Vance, who is running in Ohio against Tim Ryan. And I could give you a list of why, but he's just a terrible person. He's an absolutely awful person who has no core values. And that's the thing. These 3 candidates in particular, and it's not just them, there are others as well, like Blake Masters in Arizona. They have no core principles. They don't believe anything that they're selling, right? They're objectively terrible human beings. And their opponents in these 3 instances, 4, let's throw Blake Masters in there, Senator Raphael Warnock in Georgia, Tim Ryan in Ohio, John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, and Senator Mark Kelly in Arizona. They're all really, really, really good candidates. So I think the behavior of these 4 people is what's going to have voters staying home, which is Republican voters, that is, which is really good for us. As for what we can do, other than vote, I think at this point, again, it's not about trying to convince people who support Donald still support Donald. Let's convince people who don't typically vote. Let's help people see this election as one not between Democrats and Republicans, but between a democracy that's going to survive and one that's not. Whatever terms you think will sway people more, whether women are still going to have rights or not, whether you want appropriate gun safety legislation or not, whatever you think will help sway people to go to the ballot box, maybe for the first time or the first time in a long time. The other thing we can do is we can help register voters, and on election day, help voters get to the polls or help people with their absentee ballots somehow. So I'm sure that there are plenty of local organizations near you that can help you figure out the best way to do that. You can go to Rock the Vote is a great organization. So there is still time to make a difference. And the one thing that is going to get us over the line is huge turnout. That's how we won in 2018, and that's how we won in 2020. Let's see. From Isabel in Los Angeles. Why did we postpone the January 6 hearings? We're running out of time, and this issue needs to be fresh in people's minds going into the midterms. They postponed the hearings because of Hurricane Ian, and I think that was the right decision. Because for a couple of reasons. One, just out of respect. It was a terrible ordeal for the people down there, and I think it needed to be covered properly. But also, just factually, it would have taken it if the hearings had run that day. They wouldn't have gotten the same amount of attention because so much attention was focused on the hurricane. I don't know quite why it took them so long to reschedule the hearings. That's frustrating. And I've heard that this will be the last one, and that's because, again, our system sucks, and every single member of Congress, with the exception of Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, as it happens, needs to run for re-election. And again, Kinzinger isn't running, and Cheney lost her primary. So they all have to be out on the road getting people to vote for them. Another question is, why not in prime time? I just found out before we started that the hearing is scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern time. I still think that prime time is better because I don't know. I don't know necessarily that more people watch, but there's something about having it be at night. I do think it gets more attention. But I heard Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren say that by doing it during the day, they get more coverage at night with clips and commentary. So maybe that's the case. I trust them. Again, very disappointed this is the last one. Hopefully not ever, but certainly before the midterms. And just to let you know, we will, of course, be live streaming them. We're probably going to start at 12:45 for a little pregame. We'll provide live commentary as appropriate. We'll do some analysis during their 10-minute break, and we will have a wrap up, which I think has gone about an hour in the past. Might go longer. It depends. I have a feeling that this is going to be a jam-packed, mind-blowing hearing. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I would be thrilled if you all joined us for that. But, I'll remind you as we go. From Jeff in Austin, Texas. Normally, when the news is this depressing, I stop tuning in and drop out, but this is no time for disengagement. How can we stay informed and sane at the same time, or at least relax? You cannot stay informed and sane at the same time. I've tried. Yeah, it's a really good question because everything is just still just overwhelming. And it's not like it's suddenly overwhelming. It hasn't stopped being overwhelming. So we're all fried and stressed and tired and all that other stuff. And even a couple of days ago, I every once in a while I just having a tough time staying positive and being hopeful. But listen, it's okay. Even this close, it's okay to take a day if you need to. But if you're feeling like it's too much, you don't have to check in every 5 minutes. Stay off Twitter. Don't watch the news. I haven't been watching the news much. I haven't been on Twitter too much. I mean, obviously I need to be informed. So I when I'm feeling like I just need a break, I read. I read the news because for some reason that makes it a little easier for me to stay a little bit disengaged. As for relaxing, like in any other stressful situation, try to exercise, get your cardio in, do some weight training, get outside, be in nature, and eat properly and sleep. Sleep as much as you need to, as far as that's possible. From Marcus in Chicago. If I lived in Russia, I'd be trying to make a break for any country that would take me. Should we be open and welcoming to Russian refugees fleeing Putin? We should be open and welcoming to anybody, any refugee that's fleeing political violence. I am constantly mystified by the cruelty of this country's immigration policies. I don't understand why there's a quota. I don't understand why it's not better organized. This is a huge country with lots of land and also a country of immigrants. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but one of my grandparents and at least 4 of my great grandparents were immigrants. So I'm not really sure when that shifted. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've always treated immigrants, especially those whom we labeled not white, terribly. But the quotas and the fact that we've let in so many fewer people, especially if they're fleeing horrors, and that's what's happening at the southern border. People aren't just like strolling over here to take advantage of America. They're fleeing horrible situations. So yeah, I think we should take in as many people as we can because it just makes us stronger. That's my opinion. From Monica. Inflation is the biggest voter issue and how this may hurt the Dems' chances because we're focused on abortion rights. But everything gets more expensive when you have another mouth to feed. Why can't the media or the party tie inflation, economics, and abortion rights together? Well, inflation, and I do not pretend to understand inflation. I understand inflation about as well as I understand the stock market, which is to say, not at all. I don't know how it works. What I do know is that inflation is not something that we can regulate. We are going through a global inflation crisis. And in fact, inflation is less bad than it is in almost every place in Europe. So it's just something that we have to ride out, unfortunately. Well, about inflation, I think what we could say is that there are ways to mitigate it. Like we can't stop inflation, but one way to mitigate the negative impacts of inflation on working people is to pay them a living wage. How's that for a concept? Republicans don't want to do that. But specifically in terms of the economy of the family, right? And abortion rights. It absolutely needs to be tied together. There are many, many reasons that what's happening since the Supreme Court overturned Dobbs and essentially, cinched the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe and took away a woman's right to bodily autonomy. We need, so there are many reasons to argue that that's terrible. There are reasons that are more symbolic. You know, I live in New York City. My daughter's in New York. I am theoretically, she is theoretically a second-class citizen. You know, it doesn't affect us practically speaking, but that's still a terrible thing. However, it's nothing like being a woman in Mississippi or Alabama. However, if we look at the economics of it, I think that's something everybody could understand, because what should be pointed out is, you know, on the one hand, Republicans tell us that this microscopic tiny bit of cells is more important than the life of the girl or the woman who's been impregnated either by rape, incest, or accidentally. And yet, once that bunch of cells becomes a embryo, becomes a fetus, and then becomes an actual human, they will do absolutely nothing to provide for the child or the mother or the family. So, because by the way, I don't know if it's most, but a vast majority of either a majority of or a very significant minority of, I need to get my data, but of women who choose to have an abortion already have children. So it's a family planning issue. Anyway, so we know, I think it's Mississippi, they've determined that because of this horrific Supreme Court decision, 5,000 more children will be born, which means that 5,000 more people will be in the system, and many of those will need financial assistance, and they can't afford it. They don't have the money. So they're not going to give you childcare. They're not going to give you health care. They're not going to give you anything to subsidize payments for diapers or baby food or clothes. They're not going to do anything at all to help the extra stress somebody might be under if, one, they don't want the child, or two, they can't afford the child. So that absolutely is something that needs to happen. It's a great question. From Ruthie in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. Why has Kamala Harris been virtually invisible since she was elected? I'm wondering what she's actually doing and why she's so underutilized. Would you want her on the ticket in 2024? Yeah, she has to be on the ticket in 2024. And I don't know why. I honestly, I think she's been doing a lot. She's done a lot of foreign travel. I think she was recently in Asia. So she's not sitting around doing nothing. You know, she has a full docket, but we don't hear about it. And that's the part I don't quite understand. You know, I think it's safe to assume that some of it is sexism, some of it's racism, and some of it is perhaps, given her unique place in history, just not knowing how to make her an asset, which of course she is. I think she should be on the ticket, but also I think taking her off the ticket would just be so demoralizing to the Democratic base that it would be like suicidal. But luckily we don't have to worry about that yet. From Rose in New Zealand. I think women will, oops, sorry, I scrolled past that question. Give me 1 second. Actually love live broadcasts. Okay, so from Rose in New Zealand. I think women will step up in droves to win for Democrats. But the MAGA Republicans will claim it's been stolen again. How do you avert another civil war, or at least start the de-escalation? All right, well, let's start with the second part first. There's not going to be a civil war. The Republicans don't have the army. They are in the minority. And honestly, the people we're talking about who would be initiating violence are Donald supporters, which again is a majority of the Republican Party, but is probably like less than 20% of the country. That having been said, that doesn't mean it's going to be fun. That doesn't mean there won't be political violence. And it is absolutely something we need to be prepared for. 299 Republicans who won their primaries and are running for office are people who endorse the big lie. So that is, there are people who continue to claim that President Biden did not win the 2020 election. That is a dangerous lie. It is an incredibly dangerous lie. And of those 299 people, some of them are running for Secretary of State or Attorney General. And that means that they'll have direct or indirect power over how their elections are handled in their respective states. And with 299 of them running, that means that some of them are going to win. I think it's almost impossible that none of them will win. So we need to be prepared. I've heard that poll workers are already getting threats, the likes of which they've never gotten before. So I think states need to start beefing up security. They need to vet their poll not poll workers, but poll watchers. Like they can't let, some big lie supporting Oath Keeper be a poll watcher. Like that's a recipe for disaster. So we need to go into it with eyes wide open. We need to understand that there will be people who will claim fraud if they lose. I think, was it Carrie Lake, the completely insane woman? And actually, I don't think she's insane. I think she is just an opportunist. She's running for governor in Arizona, and during the primary, I think she claimed before the election was even held that if she lost, it was fraud. And that's when she was running against a Republican. So these people have all taken a page out of Donald's whine like a baby and hold your breath until you get your way book. It's just grievance and immaturity. Everybody else be damned. They just don't care about the people who would be their constituents. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about this country. And to the extent that the rest of us understand that and see it coming, the better prepared we'll be. All right. I think I have one more question from Henry. When are we going to see Donald in jail? Should he be pardoned to keep the peace? Okay. Second question first. No fucking way does Donald Trump get pardoned. Because you know what's really interesting about that question? It completely ignores how the majority of Americans will feel if he isn't held accountable. Most of us will lose our fucking minds if he's not held accountable. So pardoning him would be so dangerous. And that's what's so crazy to me. It's always framed as it will hurt this country if he's held accountable. Well, it will hurt this country. And that might be true. It might be true. There will be many people who are upset about it. But if he's actually guilty of the crimes he seems to be guilty of, and he's not held accountable, that's a death knell to the rule of law in this country. And it basically makes the rest of us feel like there's just no justice. And that's much, much, much more dangerous. So we need to get that idea right out of our heads. And honestly, if Joe Biden ever went down that road, I don't think he would. Then I think that would. You know what? Let's not talk about that. Let's just put it this way: he needs to be held accountable. Is he going to go to prison? I think that's highly unlikely. Because the powers that be would probably make the, in my view, incorrect calculation that that's too dangerous. They need to indict him. He needs to be a trial needs to be held. Hopefully, the evidence would show that he committed the crime and he's convicted and sentenced. But I just think that they would find imprisoning him too dangerous. But then there's also the logistics. Tragically for us, Donald was in the Oval Office for 4 years. He's still afforded Secret Service protection. And even though he's a traitor and he doesn't deserve it, what are they going to do? Put him in prison with a bunch of Secret Service guys? I mean, that just, the logistics just don't work. They would need to have to figure something out. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. I honestly think at the very least, he needs to be indicted, tried, and convicted, and we'll figure the rest out later. Because, by the way, guys, this is not happening anytime soon. It's going to be a very long, sadly, very slow process. Okay, so that is it for Ask Mary Anything Within Reason. Thank you for your excellent questions. I had a blast. Before we go, I just want to remind you that I will be having the Mary Trump Show live in person on Friday, October 21st. Maybe with a couple of Nerd Avengers. Maybe with a special local guest. Who knows? That's at Dynasty Typewriter. Again, that's October 21st at 7:30. Tickets are on sale. We'll put the link in the show notes. It would be absolutely awesome if you were there or if you spread the word. I'm so looking forward to it. It's the first time we're doing this and almost certainly not the last. So I think it's going to be really fun. And again, I would love to have you there. And that is it for the show. Please remember that we will be here next Tuesday for our strategy session with the Nerd Avengers. That's at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific at youtube.com/Politicon. And next Thursday, we're actually not going to have a regular Thursday show because the January 6th hearing is being held on Thursday. So instead of our usual time, we'll be meeting at 12:45, probably 12:45 p.m. Eastern, would be 9:45 a.m. Pacific. See, I'm getting the hang of this time zone thing. And who knows how long it's going to go. It entirely depends on how long the hearing itself is, but we are going to hang in there for the duration. That also will be at youtube.com/Politicon. And while you're on Politicon's YouTube page, subscribe to Politicon. Doesn't cost anything. Once again, it just helps us increase our numbers, which is incredibly helpful. Like the episode while you're there. Click on that bell because you will be alerted whenever an episode drops. And again, that includes live streams of this. In this case, it's the January 6th hearing. It could be an important speech. And we also have emergency episodes from time to time. We're cooking up something good for the election. And, again, I'm doing short videos that hopefully will be dropping more frequently. And all of that is at youtube.com/Politicon. And of course, you can listen to the episodes in podcast form on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And it would be very much appreciated if you gave the show a 5-star review because it helps. It really does help other people find the show. And again, that's the goal. We have a lot of work to do. We're fighting on all fronts. We're not just fighting against the Republicans and misinformation and disinformation. We're also fighting against the mainstream media that seems wholly unsuited to the crises we're facing. So that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. I will see you next Tuesday. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Stay safe and be kind.